hesitation in her voice now, as if she were thinking about how it would all become hers. "The demon chained underneath the Great Hall?" The air briefly crackled as the car passed through the magical wards that hid the campus to outside eyes. Cly said, "Ooh." And at that moment, I would have happily ripped out her eyes and shoved them into my own sockets, if it would let me see what she was seeing. Wraithwood Academy. My dream. My stolen future. I wanted to see Wraithwood with my own eyes, everything I'd only ever read about. For so many years, trapped in the gilded cage of Redbriar Manor, I'd longed to escape to its ancient halls and night-blooming gardens, libraries and bell towers. I wanted to see. But I couldn't. Because I was lying bound and gagged in the enchanted trunk in the back seat, stacked under the suitcases. "Oh, wow, look at that," said Cly, her voice only a little muffled through the wood. And I gritted my jaw, tasting the foul, bitter metal of the gag clamped between my teeth, and told myself I'd sooner die than cry. Chapter 2. The thing was, Priam Redbriar was a piece of shit, too. Like their namesake, the entire Redbriar family grew strong in a deep, nourishing, fertile bed of shit. But with him, to my shame, I'd never have realized it if my mother hadn't told me the full story. So Priam Redbriar had gone slumming in a human bar one night, 18 years ago, while his wife was pregnant, and ended the night in a back alley with a college student half his age. And then he'd wiped her memory of the night, so that by the time the evidence that she was pregnant against all odds became undeniable, she was already months and months along. And Priam hadn't bothered to take responsibility for the college student's single mother whose life he'd upended. At least, not until his daughter by his wife turned 7, old enough to make it clear that her magical ability was far weaker than it should be. He and his wife Lita tried everything. Artifacts, potions, tutors, but nothing worked. Clytemnestra Redbriar struggled to cast even the simplest and smallest of spells. To Priam Redbriar, tyrant of the magical world, one of the strongest mages in generations, that was utterly unacceptable in an heir. So unacceptable, in fact, that he remembered he might have a child elsewhere, hidden in the world of ordinary humans. This wasn't him swooping in like an incredibly belated Prince Charming to rescue Cinderella from the ashes. My mother had moved on in the years since then. She'd had to drop out of college, and her religious parents had disowned her for having a child out of wedlock, but she'd worked hard to make a life for us. We clipped coupons and shopped thrift stores, but we had enough to live on. We were happy. My mother was starting to find success as a freelance translator. Then Priam Redbriar came in and ruined her life again. In a way, it was my fault, because he'd found me just in time to witness magic that impressed even him. In my second-grade classroom, the sunlight kept getting into my eyes where I sat during the afternoon, and the teacher wouldn't let me switch seats. So I'd subconsciously rotated the entire school about 20 degrees on its foundation so the sun would stop bothering me. There was no letting us go after that. I sometimes wondered if Priam had other half-human bastards as well, besides me, because a man like him wouldn't stop at one college student. I'd read that the vast majority of half-bloods didn't manifest any magical abilities at all. They needed to have some dormant magical ancestry on their human side, from an earlier half-blood who'd passed for human, to get the right combination of genes for magic. Maybe I had other half-siblings out there, passed over because they were useless to him, and therefore beneath his generosity. They said many things about Priam Redbriar at his funeral, as my mother and I watched from a distant window, forbidden to mingle with the guests and dignitaries. He was brilliant and talented and ambitious and charismatic. For 20 years, he'd held the fate of mage society in his hands. But no one